Oh, Andrea, you're still muted.
Of course, it would start out that way. Thank you, Jordan. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I know everybody's busy, especially these evenings where it gets dark so early. So thank you for spending the hour with us talking about French as a second language and writing tonight. I'm Andrea Vogan, and I'm here with Krista Cook. We're going to introduce ourselves actually on the next slide, but we wanted to do our land recognition first. It's tricky when we do webinars because, of course, we're all joining from different areas in Ontario. This land recognition, land acknowledgement in French and English is for the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This is where I reside. I'm in Halton in Georgetown. And I'm learning about Treaty 14, which kind of covers this area. I'm going to just take a moment and read the land recognition. We would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we learn asynchronously on a virtual platform, we'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land, which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this nation home. Please join us in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can each, in our own way, move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. And in my board, which is Halton District School Board, we like to do sort of a connection with the land recognition or the land acknowledgement. So I have a link to the UNDRIP resource, which is the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous People. And please take a minute to peruse it at your leisure. There are some really incredible calls to action and some really great pieces of information to just kind of sit and think with for a little while. So I think Jordan popped that in the chat pod. We're all sort of doing different jobs and we can't see what each other is doing. So thank you, Jordan. I saw it highlighted. So we can pop to the next slide. And these are your hosts today. I'm Andrea Vogan, as I said, from Halton District School Board. I'm the French as a Second Language Instructional Program Lead and a member of the OMLTA. Krista, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oui, bonsoir. Good evening, everyone. I am Krista Cook. I work at the Peel District School Board. I'm a French immersion teacher, and I primarily work in the junior and intermediate divisions, and I am currently the OMLTA Professional Learning Chair. Donc, ravi d'être avec vous ce soir.
Merci, Krista. We can actually go to the next slide. So the way we've kind of organized the evening for you, I'm going to do the first sort of half of our slide deck, and then Krista's going to pick up and do the second half of the slide deck. And we decided not to bring you through the slide deck slide by slide by slide. We really want you to sort of get some of our thinking and understand why we landed on a lot of what we landed on. It was Krista and I working on it, but we were really communicating with a lot of the other members in OMLTA to just get it just right. And it did take quite a while. We really feel that, and Krista and I didn't know each other before starting on this project, but we ended up being very like-minded about a lot of what we were talking about. We kind of felt that through the pandemic, our writing in our French classes sort of took a back seat. We really wanted to focus on the oral, and it was so difficult during the pandemic that we were really excited to start rolling out a little more for writing. So Krista on her end and I on my end sort of both put writing, and we both ended up on the same team, which is great. I think we came up with some things that you can really use with your staff at your schools or your students in your classrooms. This big long sentence is our goal. It's the module 4 goal, what we intend to do with it. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, but just know that this took a lot of thinking to get to. We really wanted to touch on written production and interaction, which I'm going to touch on in a little bit, and authentic written situations. We bolded those two terms because they are found in the Viewer's Guide glossary, which you'll have access to also. So these were the goals for the module that we are talking about, but our goals for tonight are actually on the next slide. So our goals for tonight, we want to walk through the slide deck with you. As I said, discuss the reasoning behind what's included, introduce a few available resources, and then we'll have a Q&A period. So before we get started, Krista and I would like to get sort of an idea of who's in the room with us. So if you don't mind just putting in the chat pod where you're from and maybe what you teach or what your role is at your board, we'll kind of get an idea of who's here with us. I'll just give you a moment to do that while I figure out how to open the chat pod. There it is. Okay. Great. Excellent. So some core French, immersion. Great. Peel, Waterloo, Holy Family School. Great. We've got some
Very represented. Awesome.
Yeah, so a little bit of everything. Awesome. That's what we were really hoping. And as we went through and made this deck, that was a lot of our conversation. Well, what does this look like in grade 1? And what does this look like in grade 12? So it was difficult to get sort of into 20 slides what writing looks like in FSL. So I hope you find something that can represent your students in here and something that you can take back to your classrooms and share with your colleagues.
Awesome. And just before we move on to the next slide, I want to draw your attention to Erin, who is, she popped in the chat and she is running the Twitter chat tonight. So shout out to Erin. Erin, thanks for being with us. And I'm not sure if we mentioned behind the scenes, we have Jordan, but maybe Jordan, you've already introduced yourself. I'm not sure, but we're grateful to have you both with us.
Yes, thank you. It always takes a team to do sort of an evening like this. So thank you so much for being here. Okay, so within our slide deck, we sort of do a goal and then we talk about that goal and then we do another goal and then talk about that goal. But we wanted to put this out front. These were the goals, our main goals for this slide deck. So goal 1 was exploring and explicitly teaching the writing process. Goal 2 was creating authentic opportunities for writing. Goal 3, recognizing our learners as writers. And goal 4, implementing technology platforms and tools. We felt like we landed on these 4 goals because they're sort of the umbrella under which we do all our teaching, which we get all our ideas, where we go to for pedagogical resources. This is how the deck is organized. And after each goal, there's usually about 2 or 3 slides digging in a little deeper to these goals. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We already have all kinds of writing strategies that we use in classes that work, and we really wanted to highlight those. But with the added considerations around CRRP, which are becoming more and more prevalent, which is great. It's really becoming not an add-on, it's becoming a consideration ahead of everything else, which is wonderful. So we really wanted to lean into that also. And our new-ish digital world, as I was saying before, we really felt like during the pandemic, it was just so hard to get to everything. It was just so difficult. And we felt like writing really took a back seat. It was hard to get to. So we hope to give you a few digital examples of what you might be able to do in your classes to get at that writing process. The CEFR, I'm sure everybody in this room who's part of this French world has heard of the CEFR. We put this in and we put some explanations in the viewer's guide because there are administrators and there are department heads that don't have necessarily that background of the CEFR. So we do go into that a little bit. The example is on these 2 slides. We give a few different examples of what students might be able to do at these levels. Instead of talking about primary, junior, intermediate, we tended to talk more about the CEFR levels. Just for ease of reference for teachers, because we are going really from kindergarten to grade 12 in our province of who's learning French. So for those of you that are maybe here that don't have the background of the CEFR, in Ontario, we look at language proficiency as oral, reading, and writing, which the CEFR does as well. However, with the CEFR, they think about these things a little differently. So if we take the oral and think about it more as, can you just advance the slide, Krista? So if we think of, instead of oral, reading, and writing, we think of understanding, speaking, and writing. And our understanding are sort of when we take in the information. So that would be our listening and reading, which are two of our strands. And then speaking and writing are our other two strands in Ontario curriculum. But we want to think about speaking as oral production and oral interaction. And we want to think about writing in the same way. So we really went a little more deep into this and thought about what can we are comfortable with written production. That's typically what we've done always. We really want to promote the written interaction. We thought, how do we get there? How do we do that? So we started thinking about things like emails, things like the chat pod. We converse in the chat pod in a written way, things like text messaging. So we do talk about these a little later in the session. As we're going, start thinking about language proficiency in these terms, not necessarily only in our 4 strands that we have in our curriculum. We've linked in this slide a resource from the Ottawa Carleton Board. They put together a resource for CEFR, linking it to the Ontario curriculum. So it's a really great read, and it really gives you the idea in a nutshell of what the CEFR looks like and what it might look like in Ontario. So if you have a chance, have a look at that. On the next slide, I think I have put, I've put this is the grid, and it is available in that same booklet, which is linked on the slide also. You have on the side your understanding, speaking, and writing. And of course, in this slide deck, we're looking at writing, which is in the bottom. It's a little blurry on this slide, but it is very clear in the resource. So if you have a chance, look at that. But they're written as I can statements. So it's things that the students can do at each of these A1, A2, B1, B2 stages. So we really wanted to stick with that thinking. What can an A1 learner do? What can we expect them to do? And how do we get them there? What can an A2 learner do, et cetera, and et cetera. And they're all written as I can statements. When we, I think it's on the next slide, when we go to some of the resources we talked about in our slide deck, they're written as in simple language also, things that the students can do. They're not all written as I can or je peux, but they are written as verbs. I use resources. I write with ease. They're written in very simple terms. And there was a lot of talk about how do we start them on their journey. What we landed on was we start with the writing process. That's right in our curriculum. It's right in the effective guides. We've got this no, sorry, back to the last one. Yeah. So this graphic is actually from the effective guides, which I believe are still available online. If not, I'm sure we can get our hands on some. There's some really great stuff in there. If you haven't looked at the effective guide for writing, there's some really fantastic bare bones pedagogy that you can use in there. Guiding the success of the students, using simple templates and clear and concise criteria for each item that you do with the students. On the slide that you're looking at is sort of a student version of a success criteria. And then the next one is an observational record that the teacher could use in the classroom, again, with that very simple language, very simple, explicit things that you're looking for in the classroom. The question we often get from teachers is, what about the grammar? Don't they need to learn all of their verbs first? And while yes, it is very important to know the grammar of a new language, we use this resource, La Grammaire en Action, which we're going to link for you too, to kind of guide that teaching and guide the thought process around what students actually need to know. So we want teachers to pre-think about what the students need to know to be able to do this task today or this task this week. And that's what's explicitly taught. So if they're writing about what they did yesterday, they're not going to necessarily need to know le futur simple, or they're not even necessarily going to need to know the présent of all the verbs they're doing, but they definitely will need to know passé composé and likely imparfait of some key verbs. After sort of teaching this, if you want to advance the slide one, Krista, what this research talks about is it's like a 3-step cycle that we do. So the first one is découverte. Where are the students? What do they know? What do they need to know to do this task? So we look at different resources to sort of gauge where the students are. Are they recognizing patterns in the endings of verbs? Do they recognize if it's a past tense sentence? This is where the teacher really observes where they are. After découverte, you go to the next part of the cycle, which is précision. So you see where they need help and where they need support, and that's where you go next, la précision. And then the next step is, of course, to apply the learning into what you're doing today or this week or this unit or however it's organized for you. And then from there, you want to give them a chance to do it again and get better at it. So then you come back to the beginning and you do the cycle again, or you might even go back and forth and do that précision in between all of them. It's really meant to be a flexible tool, strategy, a teaching strategy, and it really allows you to do a back and forth with the student. And that really important part is to give them a chance to do the same thing with the same expectations again, so they can apply their learning in sort of a new project or conversation with the learning that they've had from your descriptive feedback. So we thought next we would talk about, we didn't put all of our slides in here, we put most of them in here, but one of the quotes that we really liked was a successful writing program requires a knowledgeable, organized teacher with excellent classroom management skills. Mostly, students need lots of time in which to write, a say in what they write about, strategies that allow them to problem solve independently, plan, revise, edit. So even if we think about that grammar structure we were looking at, it's the same kind of idea, and helpful response. So that was from Routman in 2005. We're hoping to put you in breakout rooms to discuss in your buildings or in your departments or in your classrooms, what are some of the barriers to successful FSL writing program for learners? What are some of the things that stand in the way of the best teaching that we can do? What needs to happen? So we'd like you to have that discussion and maybe think of a few things that could help. So not just the problems, but maybe some of the solutions that we might be able to put into practice with sort of this group discussion about it. So when you come back, we're going to put you in the breakouts in a moment. When you come back, we're going to ask you to just share one point of your discussion of what you talked about. We're not going to press send yet, but we're just going to, so just when you come back, be ready to share just one point in the chat pod. We're not going to ask everybody to put their hands up and talk. So I don't, Krista or Jordan, I'm not sure who has capabilities to do breakout rooms.
I'm working on it right now. How many breakout rooms would you like?
You're awesome. I actually don't know how many people we have, but I was thinking maybe 3 per room-ish.
Okay. Here we go. I'll set up 9, which will give us 3 or 4 per room.
Perfect.
You want them right now?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, Andrea, how long do you want the breakout rooms to go for?
Sorry, I should have said that ahead of time. Maybe 3 minutes. I think they just need a little discussion.
7:27, I'll bring everyone back.
Perfect. Thank you. Sorry, I meant to mention that when we were talking. I totally forgot.
And I'm going to use this as a quick bio break. J'arrive en quelques minutes, 30 secondes.
Okay, I'm going to close all the rooms and pull everyone back.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for taking that couple of minutes to talk with some of your colleagues. So I'm going to open up the chat pod for myself again, so I can see some of your answers. So what I'd like you to do is type in the chat pod, but don't press enter yet. Just type in what some of the barriers are that you see to a successful FSL writing program, keeping in mind what Routman defines as a successful FSL writing program. And when I say go, we're all going to press enter at the same time. So they're all going to come up sort of at the same time. Ready? Okay, go. Press enter. Yeah. Resources, vocabulary. Yeah. Great. Yep. Time. Absolutely. Time for sure. Great. Thank you for sharing those. Yeah. Translation software, confidence. Absolutely. Great. And I would imagine that most of the groups touched on similar things. We all know what French classes look like, where these kids want to write about all these rich ideas they have and they don't have the vocabulary. So then they rely on Google Translation, and then they don't feel like they're being able to do it. It's sort of a cycle, isn't it? Thank you for sharing all of that. Is there anybody that, excellent, wow, they're still coming in, good. Great. Is there anybody that wants to share out loud what they wanted to say, or are we good in the chat pod? So Scott says, when I allow them to use Google Translate, I often have them read it and we discuss the sentence. That's a great strategy to sort of have a little more onus on the students to know what they're saying. Great, thank you so much for sharing those. I'm going to pass the mic over to Krista.
Hey.
Are there any questions up until this point that I missed? Okay, great. Well, thank you for participating in that half of the presentation. Krista, I'm passing it over to you.
Merci, thank you very much, Andrea. Bonsoir, rebonsoir à tout le monde. Just before I begin this part, the second half of the presentation, Scott, two things you wrote really resonated with me, and we'll touch on those as we go through the next phases of our webinar. But number one, la simplicité est clé, so keep it simple. We talk about feeling overwhelmed. We talk about feeling in a hypermobile and hyper tech world. It's la simplicité est clé, so simplicity is key. And again, we'll get to tech a little bit later, but just because I saw it pop up, Scott, is the allowing students and learners to use these translation services, because we know that they're going to, but then teaching them how to use it effectively as a tool and discussing. So they're aware of themselves as writers, and they see what they've written and how that's translated. And then we bring that back to their reflection of their own thinking and the steps that they're already doing, which could again increase their confidence. And I'm seeing that again in the chat is a lot of lack of confidence. So if we really use what we have, the translation services that are out there, and teach these tools and how to use them effectively, it could also really boost their learning and their engagement, which we know is crucial to their success in FSL. So avant que je commence, before I start, I just want to make you aware of a couple things. Number one, I automatically translate myself. So I code switch. It's a reflex. So voilà, je vais faire de mon mieux. Secondly, I am in the kind of out of practice when it comes to managing tech. I love technology, but I also don't have the best technology, so I will have to keep my audio on the entire time as I'm flipping through slides, and my audio kind of gets a little bit choppy here and there. So I apologize in advance for bad sound if that happens to you and it's from my end on because of my tech. So, merci infiniment. Ensuite, on passe. Alors, writing FSL and CRRP, as Andrea mentioned earlier, CRRP is something that we're glad has such a huge focus now. And so we really wanted to bring that to the forefront of this. And we know it can get confusing or difficult, and we a back and forth as well about how this fits in, and rather than seeing it as fitting in, we see this as it just woven throughout our program and our writing programs. So of course, one of our main focuses in this module that you will see and use with your educators is how and where equity is visible in FSL writing. So when Andrea and I were planning, we kept this, like I said, at the forefront of the resources and support documents that we've put in the modules. And of course, we thought, as you see on the screen here, that shared writing is probably comment dirais-je, a familiar strategy to a lot of us as teachers, and especially if we're teaching in the FSL, because many of us have used shared writing in their first language of instruction. So we pulled this from the Guide to Effective Instruction in Writing, Kindergarten to Grade 3 from 2005. So again, like Andrea said, we weren't looking to reinvent the wheel. We were looking to use the strategies that we have and the great things that have come out of years and years of work and research to boost our FSL curriculum our FSL writing under the guise of CRRP. So we thought that this applies nicely to FSL instruction, and educators can plan an equitable writing opportunities by providing writing prompts which focus on learners' lived experiences, and this will allow them to develop their sense of self. So we're talking about our learners now, their personal connections, while potentially getting to know other learners' cultures and experiences as well. And this is all in the modules and the viewer's guide as well. And it's something that you can work through and unpack with your FSL educators. So of course, we wanted to look at the gradual release model as well. And what does that look like in FSL writing? And we wanted to bring that together. So in order to plan for equitable writing, we grouped this with the writing process. Because we feel that gradual release helps to support where learners are in the writing process. And it helps them ultimately move forward through the writing process, no matter where they start in FSL. And bringing that back to CRRP, on this slide, we have learner identity, really where that starts, and cultural diversity, or culture and diversity. And looking at those two pieces, we know, and we've seen in the chat as well, that not all FSL learners, even if they're in the same grade or they're in the same program, will have the same entry points based on their sociocultural experiences. And so we thought that those two pieces, gradual release and the shared writing, were very important when we were creating this module. And of course, under the guise of equitable planning and CRRP, we wanted to connect this to the CEFR. And like Andrea said in the beginning, we used a lot of that, the CEFR, the I can statements, the je peux, in order to guide our planning, because we felt that it really does provide multiple ways, multiple entry points to support the needs of all learners in their FSL writing. And just something that you see l'organisateur graphique dans les numériques ici, I actually used with a group of learners in the summer. I was doing a summer learning with my board, and I didn't know who I was getting. I didn't know the amount of experience and exposure in FSL or to the French language. It was a very open, broad summer learning program for FSL learners. And so I found myself with a mix, like we are today, of core French, French immersion, primary, junior, intermediate. So a mix of everything. And again, saw this as an opportunity to bring in the CEFR and plan for equitable writing, understanding that they're coming from different experiences with the French language. So I found with this group, IDEO was a very supportive program, because it motivated students and learners to write. So what you see here is an organisateur graphique d'un récit de soi. So if we're talking identity and learners recognizing themselves as writers, or being aware of when they are actually writing in French, un récit numérique, otherwise known as an identity text, is a great place to start. And I found that each one of my learners, despite that they were coming from core French, French immersion, some French spoken at home, they were able to access this in some way. They were able to create an identity text. And they were also able to collaborate with each other and use each other, it worked to each other's strengths. So if there was a learner who was in French immersion, they would help guide, for example, a learner who had just started in core French. And one thing everyone I found had in common was not their context and their identity, the récit numérique, but it was the fact that they had one. And so that was a great starting point I found for a variety of French learners. Now, the use of technology, which I know you all unpack in different ways and in different boards, but we really wanted to look at how we can maximize the efficient use of technology to support FSL learners in writing. And that's why I brought that up, Scott, when I saw your point in the chat, was so often and throughout the pandemic, it was just, we started to rely so heavily on written interaction and saw this as opportunity. So thinking back and looking back and zooming out, we saw this as an opportunity, and in fact, many opportunities, to help develop that awareness of when the interaction in French is happening. So to Scott's point about we all know as FSL educators when learners are using translation services. So using those as teachable moments and using those as moments for discussion, and using a piece of writing that they have curated through the use of a service like Google Translate, and then breaking that down and looking at that in terms of actually writing. And again, like Andrea said, how often we've had to email students or type in the chat pod, or they've had to email us or write a comment on Google Classroom or whatever the virtual learning platform is, or was at the time to support your FSL learning throughout the pandemic. So we thought, let's kind of go back to that and see where the opportunities were, and we wanted to bring that into this module. So we found that, again, these three CEFR universal design for learning or planification à rebours and voice and choice were really key when we're looking at developing that awareness of interaction in FSL writing. Again, not necessarily new concepts, but ways to things to draw on and anchoring documents which support the efficient use of technology. So we know that evolving technology is constantly evolving, and provides within the landscape of writing, I guess in FSL, it's constantly evolving, which means it's constantly providing us with new opportunities. So educators may wish to select technology which offers learning opportunities to explore how in the French language as well evolves as the technology evolves. We know things like translation services, Google Translate or DeepL, like they're constantly evolving as the language itself is evolving as well. So here we thought with your FSL educators, we can look at these as opportunities to use voice and choice by allowing learners to select their own technological supports when writing. And we've broken that down in the in the module and the viewer's guide, so that you can work through that and what different options that looks like, and then how that connects or is anchored within the CEFR, within UDL, and providing learners voice and choice, because that is our ultimate goal. So you'll see this in the module as well, in the viewer's guide. And when you open these slides with your educators, these are goals that we would hope you'd work through with your educators. So we'd hope that you could explore and explicitly teach the writing process in order to support learners to select effective strategies and problem solve when writing. Again, to not miss out on that crucial piece from copy paste or cut and paste into a translation service. We also hope that you can create authentic opportunities for writing. So through the use of CEFR and the prompts, je peux, the email interactions, chat pods, really capitalizing and maximizing the use of technology to create those authentic grammaire en action. Let's look at how this verb changed and why maybe the translation used this one instead of this verb, and how that jumps from one language to another to create those authentic writing tasks. Recognizing our learners as writers. So that's the culturally responsive and relevant pedagogy in our classrooms, ultimately to support learner identity, create personal entry points for writing, but also to see diversity as a source of enrichment, whether it's diversity, it's sociocultural diversity, or diversity in their access to technology, or diversity in their experience with French as a second language. And so that is one of our hopes, is that we can extend that learner identity to, or build upon learner identity and generating and creating learner identity, and taking that beyond to look at the richness that comes from the diversities in their identities. And finally, implementing technology platforms and tools. One of our first conversations that Andrea and I had, not really knowing each other, was technology and virtual learning platforms are here to stay. If not permanently, they're here for the next little while. And so you may have had to flip very quickly to a virtual learning environment throughout the pandemic, or maybe you were already well versed, and so it was an easier transition for you. But given that this is our context now, and the use of technology has taken on, I guess, a modified role. I don't want to say there's more use of technology than there was. I don't want to talk post pandemic, but really, the idea is that technology is going to be here, and virtual learning platforms are going to be here for a while. And so how can we really use that to maximize writing in French immersion, in French immersion, c'est un réflexe, in FSL, because there is so much potential out there. It's just about how to choose those tools, those moments, and what that looks like. Donc, sans trop attarder, that we hope this resource helps you and your FSL educators eliminate some of the barriers that you talked about in the chat that you face in FSL writing. Again, common things we've seen and we've heard is confidence, the use of technological platforms, the use of translation services. And so we as educators ourselves have faced some of these barriers. And that is why we are passionate about writing in French immersion, or Français immersion, my bad, in FSL. And these modules were created under the leadership of the Ontario Modern Language Teacher Association. The OMLTA is a not-for-profit professional association that has been supporting French as a second language and international languages as well. Teachers of all programs since 1886. So if you come and join us for our spring conference, for example, and you're playing a trivia game, you have one of your first answers, most likely. So these modules were designed to support FSL educator retention and recruitment by deepening the understanding of the directions, principles, and content of the Ontario curriculum policy documents, as you saw throughout this facilitators webinar, and for all three programs. So French Core, Extended French, and French Immersion. And the OMLTA would like to thank the Ministry of Education for its financial support in developing this module. And a special thanks is also extended to the educators who contributed their expertise and experience to the development of all of these modules. And I am not sure if that was Jordan supposed to do the acknowledgements on the last slide. I may have, okay. And that concludes our webinar. So again, on vous remercie infiniment d'être ici avec nous. We do have a question and answer piece to this, but I am also going to let Jordan jump in as the behind the scenes and see if there's anything.
I just wanted to actually jump in. There was a question in the chat pod that I saw that Jordan did answer. I don't know if everybody saw it. Somebody asked, Krista and I often reference the slide deck and the viewer's guide. And the question was, where are these available? Are they on the OMLTA site? And Jordan answered, I think, and they will be very soon.
I'm going to do that right now, Andrea.
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
Yeah. So I was just going to say thank you everyone for joining us. Some stuff is already posted on omlta.org. Some of it's coming in the coming days, but at the moment you can access the webinars and the modules on the OMLTA YouTube channel. The viewers guides with the links to all of the resources are coming in the next few days. I'm also going to let you know you will be receiving an email by the end of this week with links to references that were discussed in all of the webinars. A few things that were asked for from the previous webinars, some links from the speaking chat, some of the listening resources, and some stuff that Wendy put together from reading. So you're going to get all of that in an email by the end of this week, along with a link to complete a survey and give us some feedback on all of these modules and all of these webinars so that we can plan our upcoming professional development with the OMLTA and the MLC. So thank you to Andrea and to Krista for your great webinar this evening. I'm going to turn off the recording so that you can feel free to turn on your mics and your cameras and ask any questions. And otherwise, thank you for joining us for all 4 of these webinars, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone. Merci.
Merci beaucoup.